After leaving Shane and Ilya at the cottage over Christmas weekend, I packed up, came home, caught my breath, indulged in copious amounts of Hudson and Connor interviews, and then I finally dove into the series that started it all, Rachel Reid's Game Changer series. And I like to go in order. I like to be orderly, follow the rules as much as I can. So I started with book one, Scott and Kip's book, Game Changer. Now I'm curious, for those of you who read the books, what did you think of Scott and Kip's Game Changer book? I have very mixed feelings about the book. I had high expectations, and I will let you know as the video progressed whether the book met my expectations. But let's get into it. If you haven't read Game Changer, it is the story of New York Admirals hockey captain Scott Hunter. He's in a really big slump, having a losing streak on the ice. He's not doing very well. And he has a chance encounter with a very hot smoothie barista, Kip Grady. Sparks fly instantly, and they embark upon a relationship, but the conflict is Scott has a very high profile life and he's still in the closet and Kip is out. So the story kind of unpacks how they navigate a relationship when one is high profile in the closet and one is out and proud. And it also talks a little bit about navigating class differences between a celebrity and a guy next door. And that brings us into the tropes that are covered in the story. It's a hockey romance, first and foremost. And I have read some hockey romances on and off in the decade that I've been a romance reader. I'm neither here nor there on hockey romance. There's a lot of good ones, but it's not like my go-to trope. This book also features a secret romance, and I do love a good secret romance, but my favorite trope that's covered in this book is this a celebrity encounter with a guy next door. I love the celebrity encounter trope. I love when a celeb comes in and sweeps an ordinary person off their feet. That's my favorite trope. So I was very excited to get into this book because of that trope. Now let's break down the characters. Like I said, Scott Hunter is the New York Admirals captain. He is a very famous and in-demand hockey player. He's on a losing streak, but he's still beloved by the city. He's also a philanthropist, and he's an orphan. And he's deeply lonely, and he feels like there's something is missing in his life. And he's felt that way for a long time by the time we dive into the story. And then we have Kip Grady, the hot smoothie barista. He has a history degree, but he's kind of underemployed. He has a lot of student loan debt. He's living with his parents. His parents are very supportive, but he's unhappy with his life. He's not 100% sure what he wants to be doing, but he knows he wants something better. And so he has this constant frustration and feeling like he's not living up to his potential. And when these two meet, they both feel like they're missing something, and they are each other's missing piece. Okay, like every book, this book had its good points, which I call the roses, and it had its points that I didn't care for, which I call the thorns. To be clear, Rachel Reid is a queen, and I am so happy for this gift she has given us with the series. But this book is not perfect. But first, let's dive into the roses. Let's dive into what I loved about this book. So I love how Kip kind of provides a safe space for Scott. Kip seems to understand right away that it's a lot of pressure on Scott, how everybody wants something from him. And he tells Scott this. He's like, I'm sure it's hard that everybody wants a piece of you. I know that's a lot of pressure. And Scott's like, I don't want to complain. And Kip's like, you can complain to me. And this is the first time they go out outside of the smoothie shop. And Kip instantly provides that safe space for Scott. And I really love that beat. And I wish you would have had more of that. I love that Kip allows Scott to be just Scott from Rochester instead of Scott Hunter, captain of the Admiral. So I love that aspect. And I love how Scott in turn shows Kip how appreciated he is and how special he is. Even though Scott is a big celebrity and Kip I think Kip perceives himself as a loser. I wouldn't call Kip a loser. Everybody struggles, but I think that's how he sees himself. But Scott doesn't see him that way. and he shows Kip right out of the gates how much he sees him as an equal and how much he appreciates him. So I really love that dynamic between them. Kip is a soft, comfortable, safe space for Scott, a place for him to escape from his high pressure lifestyle. And then Kip gets to feel appreciated and valued because of how Scott like showers him with praise and love. I also like how in the beginning of the book, Scott tries to get to know Kip, and he asks Kip what would he rather be doing with his life, but without being judgmental. Like he asks Kip to open up about his dreams, but he doesn't say like what he's doing isn't good enough as is. But he wants to know more of Kip, and he wants to know his aspirations, and I really appreciated that part. The beginning of the book does have a couple of good beats in it that I appreciate, and I wish I could have seen more of that bonding, but I'm glad that we got at least a little bit of it. Also, in addition to a couple of good beats between Scott and Kip, we get some Ilya Rozanov cameos. I did not know that Ilya was in book one. And when he first shows up, I get so excited. I light up like I saw an actual literal celebrity in front of me. But I love every moment Ilya's on the page. We only get a little of him and it's in small doses, but those are some of the highlights of the book for me. I think Ilya is going to be the star of the series for me as I continue the series. But we get some Ilya cameos, and it is definitely a rose in this book. I am so happy that he was featured in there, and he was just being his saucy menace, pain in the ass self, and I loved him for it. And every time I saw Ilya in the book, I like inside in my head, I read his lines in Connor Storrie's Russian accent. So I really love that. I enjoyed that part so much. And I love the ending. The ending was so happy and celebratory and satisfying. But without being cheesy, it was very happy, but it wasn't cheesy. And I love how the issue of Scott coming out was handled aspirationally, but not unrealistically. I like that there were actual stakes and there were some realistic elements to it, but it was still aspirational and how we wish things could be. So I really love the ending. That was probably my favorite part of the book, besides the Ilya cameos. The happy ending was, what does romance readers crave? So I really appreciated the ending of this book. So the book definitely had its high points. It had its roses, but it was not without thorns. So let's get into it. The thorns, a part of the book I didn't care for. So if this book were a meal and it was served to me at a restaurant, I would send it back to the kitchen. This book had too much sugar and too much spice all at the same time. The characters fall in love instantly and they are gushing over each other so much, and it is just too much. It is syrupy sweet to the point of being like, it was just too much. There were points where it was really cute and I loved it, and I'm like, oh, this is warm and cozy and cuddly and I enjoy this. But then it would go just one step too far and I would get uncomfortable. The relationship moved way too fast. If this wasn't happening in the confines of a safe romance book where I know a happy ending is guaranteed, I would have been suspicious that they were love bombing each other. It seemed like Scott was love bombing Kip, especially in the bathtub scene. They're already planning a future together. They're attached at the hip, inseparable. And Kip moves fast too. But and I hate to be jaded, but if this wasn't like a safe romance novel where happy endings were guaranteed, I would be like, oh, is there a predator in the mix? Like there's some love bombing going on, or like they're about to manipulate the other. So it made me kind of uncomfortable. And then also there was too much spice. And I never thought I would say that in my life. Like I usually scream for the steam. Like I am thirsty and hungry for the spiciness. I live for spiciness in books. I love a good spicy read. I've been reading spicy books for the past decade now. But this book did it way too much. Like I haven't read Shane and Ilya's book, Heated Rivalry, but I like, at least in the show, there's a build up. Like even though the spice happens fairly quickly, there's still like tension and yearning, and by the time it happens we're hungry for it because it's been a build up. But here in the book, in Scott and Kip's book, there's no build up. They just hop straight into hooking up, and then they hook up every other damn chapter for the whole first half of the book. And it's so much so that it's overkill, and it starts to get like kind of boring. Like my eyes kind of glaze over. Even though the scenes are well written, like they are spicy, she does do some good sex choreography, I would say, but it just became dull because it was overkill. And like I said, the sweetness was too much too. Not to keep comparing Scott and Kip to Shane and Ilya, and I haven't read Shane and Ilya's book yet, like I said, but I like how in the show there's like some snarky banter between Shane and Ilya, and like playful like ribbing and jabbing, and it's like really cute and like push and pull. But Scott and Kip, all they say is "I love you, I love you, I love you. You're so amazing. I love you. You're so beautiful." And it's just it's way too much. It was giving me a stomach ache. Too much sugar and too much spice all in one. Like I said, if this were a restaurant dish, I would be like, send this back to the kitchen. But yeah, it's not unforgivable. I still think it was a good book, but also there are some other thorns. So in the second half of the book, we get more plot and less spice, and I'm grateful. I really liked the second half of the book better than the first half because it wasn't overstuffed with spice. But even though we got more plot, the plot in general is kind of flat. There aren't many twists in this book. There aren't many surprises. And some of it is kind of like the nature of the storyline. Like part of the conflict is that because the relationship is secret, Kip is stuck alone in Scott's apartment, bored and lonely. And so we as the reader kind of get trapped in Scott's apartment for the duration of the book, and it gets kind of boring. All they do is like have sex and eat occasionally in the apartment. There's like just not much going on in the plot. There are a couple of exciting hockey scenes that I appreciated, but it's a pretty flat and simple plot. There's like not a lot going on, but it's not unforgivable. It's still enjoyable. If you want something where you could just shut your brain off and just read straight through, and you're not going to go on any kind of roller coaster, you just need something safe, this is a straight line, then this book is for you. But if you're looking for a little more meat to sink your teeth into, the plot falls a little flat in certain areas of this book. And the final thorn, I think this is just a me thing. And spoiler alert, there's a mild spoiler. This is not a major plot point. It's just this tiny little thing that bothered me. It's not even a big part of the book. But if you don't want to hear spoilers, then cover your ears for this part. But there is a scene where it's Kip's birthday, and Scott writes Kip a check for $50,000 to pay off his student loans as a birthday gift. And one of the joys of reading fiction is to live vicariously through the characters. And I love this fantasy. The scene made me like the book more at first. I was like, oh my gosh, like how beautiful would it be to have your hockey boyfriend love you so much he paid off all your loans. I would love that. So I'm loving this scene at first, and I'm like, oh my gosh, wish fulfillment, living vicariously through the characters, dream come true. But then Kip gets mad at Scott for writing the check, and they kind of fight over it. And Kip refuses the gift because he wants to prove he can handle his own life. And so he says he's going to rip up the check, and he won't let Scott pay off his loans. This took me out of the story a little bit. I don't think I've ever been more disappointed with a fictionalist character's personal decision. I was so disappointed in Kip for not taking that check. If he would have taken the check, it would have made Scott happy, and it would have set him up in a better position in his life for the rest of his life. That was like life-changing money, but he turned it down. So I'm curious what you think. Do you think Kip should have accepted the gift from Scott to pay off his student loans? And what would you do if your multi-millionaire boyfriend offered to pay off your student loans or your mortgage or your whatever? Would you accept it? I would have definitely accepted it. I was so disappointed he didn't, and it took away from my enjoyment of the scene. But like I said, I think that's a personal thing for me. I think I'm just too nitpicky with it. But those are the thorns. So how would I rate this book overall? When I weigh the roses with the thorns together, what would I give it on a 5-star scale? I would give the book 3.5 stars total. It gets the extra zero point 0.5 stars for the Ilya cameos that I loved and for the amazing happy ending that made my heart sing. But other than that, the book was just average, but not horrible. And overall, I'm glad I read it. So 3.5 stars. Pretty solid. Okay, I want to quickly compare the book to the TV adaptation of Game Changer. I'm really glad I finally read the book. After seeing episode 3 of Heated Rivalry season 1, I really wanted to read the book, and especially after seeing episode 5. So both were good in their own right, and the TV show stuck pretty closely to the book. But I'm really glad I watched the show before reading the book, because when I was reading the book, I got to picture the actors Francois Arnaud as Scott and Robbie GK as Kip instead of how they were described in the book. And I think they were hotter in the TV show, both in looks and in personality. So I'm glad I had the TV show image in my head instead of the book descriptions. In the book, Kip is more rough around the edges and more aggressive, and I think I prefer the sweeter, more wholesome puppy dog Kip from the show. And also, Scott is hotter in the show too. But there are some things that I think that the book did better just because it was able to do more with the medium of being a novel rather than having the constraints of a TV show. I liked in the book we are able to see all the details leading up to their big grand moment in episode 5, the big kiss. We're able to see everything leading up and building up to that, and I really appreciated that. And also in the book, we got more background on just how lonely Scott was and how hungry he was to meet someone and why meeting Kip was so special. So I really appreciated that the book was able to go into more detail about that. But overall, the book and the show were equal. I think I think if I had to choose, I enjoyed the show just a little bit more because I don't need like a ton of Scott and Kip. I didn't need like a whole novel worth of Scott and Kip. Just getting little tastes of them in the show worked better for me. But overall, good job to both the show and the book. So while I didn't love Game Changer the book, I did like it. And I'm so glad that I read it. The curiosity was killing me. But now I'm really looking forward to the main attraction, reading Shane and Ilya's book, Heated Rivalry. I think there's a consensus among fans that Heated Rivalry is the best book of the series. But let me know if you agree with that. If you've read the series, do you think Heated Rivalry is the best book? And if you read Game Changer, what did you think of it? What would you give it on a 5-star scale? How many stars would you give it? And what did you like better, the book Game Changer or the TV adaptation of Scott and Kip's relationship? Let me know. I'm dying to hear your thoughts. Until next time, much love.